In my opinion, understanding one's innermost motivations and personal calling is incredibly important in life, because I believe that's where each individual's answers really lie.
Alan, you work with a lot of student athletes at USC. Do you find that they struggle with their personal identity beyond being an athlete?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the core challenges that they face, is like trying to figure out how to be really, really good at something, but also not let it dominate their entire lives.
Right. And how do you guys work with them to help them sort of navigate outside of that just singular identity?
Well, and I think it's evolving over time. Like initially, it's sort of like telling them, hey, look, this isn't everything. You have to plan for your future in case something goes wrong, that kind of thing. But now, I believe it's about trying to help student athletes think about themselves as young as possible beyond athletics. So really preparing for what they call day one, which is day one after your athletic career is over. You start planning for that or even early as middle school, high school, and think about it all the time is sort of the direction most folks are moving into.
Okay, so Alan, when I was playing an eternity ago, there's so much focus that goes into the sport, and the belief that you can win the game and perform and get there and get to the next chapter and so on, that I always felt like if you take the eye off that ball and think about, okay, what am I doing when I retire? And that might happen sooner than I want. So how do you balance those things?
That's always been the fear, right? It's sort of like, especially at a place like USC, right? Where you're trying to play at the highest level, and you're just to be there or get there and stay there. You're right. To think about anything else is sort of like sabotaging your dreams, right?
Right.
But now I think you think of it as a formula, right? And that formula is, how are you able to do that when the moment calls for it, but then also think about what else you need to be doing as a way to be successful in your dreams, is having a backup plan. So we sort of like sell it as a part of the success plan as opposed to a threat to success. Mm-hmm. Like we say, hey, here are folks who have come through here and they figured out how to have that balance in place and not like jeopardize what they really, really care about or everything that they've been working on for so long.
Is part of it compartmentalizing? Because even all of us, I didn't play college sports or pro sports, but I have, as an executive with a wife, kids, there's different aspects of your life that make up who you are. Do you also kind of work with them on, especially because they are student athletes, not just athletes?
Well, so for me, the role that I have, I get a chance to like work with people who do the direct work with the student athletes, right? Mm-hmm. But even with my graduate students, even my own kids, like my twin daughters were athletes, right? And they walked away from the sport and struggled with it. And so trying to help them, put like everything in perspective and slowing things down and figuring out like how you would in a game or a competition, like how do you pay attention to your stride but not over focus on it, or how do you think about that injury in terms of what you need to do but also not let it hamper what you're supposed to do. We use those kinds of metaphors and just to help like figure out how to balance. Young people nowadays with social media, with all the different all the things that are coming at them, information, decisions, controversy, they come more and more prepared to like at least think about these things. But then how do you help them like speak out and ask questions and show vulnerability? Like, I'm really worried about this internship because I'm missing practice. And what does that say? Does that say that, my dream sport is not as important as my career? How do I do it? Like to be able to talk about that and be able to figure out how to cope with it in a healthy way is really important.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned social media, and the thing about social media also is, I like to use the term living your best Instagram life. So do you also, you see with a lot of the younger student athletes, or just athletes or young people in general, that idea of, and you use the word vulnerability, the last thing people want to show on their social media feed is vulnerability. They want to show themselves living the high life.
Exactly. I was just in the cafeteria the other day, and there were a couple of athletes sitting around talking, and one of them came in and started talking about some music that he developed. He plays the keyboard, and he was telling the story. He's like, yeah, well, you know, I'm doing this, and I didn't hear the whole conversation, but it was sort of like he hadn't picked up his music in a very long time. And he said something, because you all know me, I have a very subtle social media presence about my art. Right. So this is a football player like making a statement like that, because he has to navigate, like, so not everyone's just like blasting everything out there. Right. Folks have different like ways of dealing with it and different sides of themselves, right? So yeah, I think young people are more and more sophisticated. It's challenging, because it's just like one more thing to worry about, but I find they're being more sophisticated about, you know, how to handle those pressures.
So how, Alan, do you, in your dealings with the athletes, do you get them to really, we've talked about different sort of categories or roles that they might have in life, right? They might be a son or a daughter, they might be a student, they might be an athlete, they might be, you know, they're gonna have a career at some point in time, but do you guys do anything that, whether it's journaling or meditation or things of that nature, where they can really
reflect
on, like, why am I here? What's really important to me? Things of that nature.
Yeah, again, so I get a chance to see a wonderful sports psych staff that we have and work with our student athletes. And then when we talk about learning specialists and tutors and all the academic support that they have, there are always these opportunities to do things that are focusing on their well-being, right? Helping them as they sort of like frame as packaging into this like well-being idea. So whether it's like journaling, whether it's using an assignment in class to kind of like talk about yourself or experience or reflect on what you're going through, what you've been, you know, what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. More and more that's becoming
being real with themselves.
Yeah, being real, being authentic.
You had previously shared with us an exercise you went through with some of the student athletes where you talked about their values and what they most valued. Without giving away who the athletes are or whatever, walk us through what that's like, not only just in that particular session maybe that you ran, but the idea of it.
So, I mean, and this is the work that I do, not only with athletes, but I've been doing, I'm a counseling psychologist by training, so I've worked in a number of settings: jails, prisons, juvenile facilities, group homes, schools, of course, universities and that such. And so this is an activity I always like to do, is where you give everyone 3 pieces of paper and get their real full commitment to say that you're going to play this game to the end. You're not going to drop out once you see how challenging it is. And everyone agrees. And so I say, write down the 3 most important things in your life. And I give them examples. It could be family, it could be your talent, it could be something physical, tangible, intangible, and you write it down, and then we talk about it, and then grab a hat and say, okay, everyone, you're gonna take one of those 3 and you're gonna have to throw one in, and when you throw it in, you're not gonna have that anymore.
So when you throw it in the hat, that means basically that value's gone. So now you're down to your 2 values.
2 values, right? And then you go around and ask them, like, okay, well, what did you keep and why? And you learn some really powerful things. And 2 things you learn, I try to generalize them on 2 things. One is why people kept what they kept. And we always say, like, tell us what you kept, don't tell us what you gave away, right? And tell us why you kept what you kept, right? And so we split it up, and then you get a chance to kind of hear what people are going to say. In any group that you're with, it's always going to be different. And I always try to do it with them, or the facilitator, like the teacher, like we all try to do it, and we always learn something. I always learn something even about myself in doing this,
Interesting,
right?
Yeah.
But the other thing I think is really powerful about it is that they learn about each other. They're learning that everyone's different, right? Everyone has different priorities, and hopefully, and I said, well, I encourage them to continue to talk to each other and continue to explore both inwardly and outwardly.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
From the sports perspective, there's so much focus on the game and or the event and winning and performing and all of that, that it just kind of takes over your being. But doing these sorts of exercises allow people, it seems like, to rise above that, to see the bigger picture of what life is all about for them.
Right. So sports is supposedly a metaphor for life, right? But it's also life, right?
Yeah.
And so how to vacillate between the two, how do you take like what's going on in the moment in life and apply it to your sport or athletic career and vice versa? And how then can you grow over time by understanding your trade or your whatever it is that you're focusing on, but understanding what the big picture is, right? So when things like a pandemic comes along and you try to like say, oh wow, what is really important? What I thought was important, but now I really learn more and more like how to kind of change the lens of my glasses to look like inward at times versus like far down the road, and trying to figure that all out.
You talked about the pandemic and all of that went on. I mean, and I think it's contributed a great deal with the stresses on these student athletes. Mental health has become just this overwhelming thing now in sports, in college and high school and everywhere, and kids are committing suicide. And why? What's going on?
Well, I wouldn't say it's becoming an issue. I think it's an issue that's always been around. But even when I played and went through it, it was not something you talked about. It's not something you paid attention to. You certainly, and over time it's gotten better. But I think even just before the pandemic, I think last few years, the suicides, the professional athletes and others who are coming out and talking about their struggles and making it clear that this is a part of what they're doing. I mean, this afternoon I'm doing a lecture, a guest lecture, and I'm talking about the way in which professional athletes, famous athletes, have used their platforms to not only help others, but also help themselves in terms of telling their story and normalizing the struggles that they go through. And I don't want to call it a fad, but it's more like it's okay to do that now. It's acceptable.
Yeah. Which is great.
Which is very good.
It's wonderful. So do you think the work that you're doing with the athletes, that's part of what the positive outcome comes from it, is this idea that when you start to understand who you are and what's important to you, when you do have those inevitable failures in life, they don't become as devastating?
That's certainly a benefit of like self-exploration and reflection and that sort of thing. And I also feel like a lot of young people today, particularly with social media and all the attention that comes on them, they think they know who they are, or they're always focusing on themselves, right? So sometimes it's about figuring out who you are internally, like who you are like to yourself, or how you feel about the world, and how people see you, and understanding the differences between the two, and understanding how that fits in the context of a team or another objective that you're trying to accomplish, whether it's recovering from an injury or focusing on a major or a class that's really difficult. Like, it's not always all about you, right? So yeah, understanding deeply who you are in multiple facets, and understanding how to put that in the context of helping others. Like sometimes it's like, you're so focused on yourself and someone else is in need, and you're not even paying attention because you're so caught up in who am I? Well, understanding who you are in the context of the world around you is just as important.
There was a story in Wimbledon this year that I saw of a tennis player who was playing a match, and in between a point, one of the ball boys became ill and wasn't feeling well, and kind of fainted-like symptoms. And she ran to get a water bottle and some other like things in her bag, and jogged to this kid and started taking care of him. And she was playing, to your point, she was playing in the match.
Right.
How cool is that, of having that sort of perspective? It wasn't just about her, bigger picture, that's an evolved human being right there.
It is, and from brain research, we know that the ability to dive deep into like playing on the world stage of tennis, but then having the capacity to empathize or care and know what to do, that's high level of brain functioning right there.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
This is the part where we're supposed to tell people to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Okay, will you please do that then? I mean,
Yeah.
if you enjoy it,
Yeah.
please do.
And if you don't, do it anyways, because we need your help.
We do.
Also, we have a website called GameChangeNation.com. Just go there and subscribe and you'll get tons of free content.
And what we're really trying to do is create a community of people that love sports.
Yep.
And the great lessons that we learn from sports, but we want to hear from you.
We do. So we're going to have a bunch of social media pages from TikTok to Instagram to Twitter to Facebook. Instagram, I probably already said all of them. Please join them and tell us your stories. We'd love to hear from you. Oh, and we wrote a book.
Oh,
Forgot about that.
Forgot that.
The book is called Through the Tunnel. It's available on Amazon now. If you go straight down here to this link that you can see below us, you will be able to purchase it. We'd love it if you could do it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.